where Liam Lawson is officially replaced by Yuki Tsunoda, starting at the Japanese Grand Prix after just 2 races. First, Sam, just your quick reactions, your quick thoughts about the breaking news.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of shocked by this. I mentioned on our Sunday pod that this could be in the future, that maybe around a summer break they'd take some time to reevaluate Lawson's performance. And I knew that where he was at right now was not going to stick long term with a team like Red Bull. But even I was shocked by this decision to do it so early. I wonder if a big part of it is just this being Yuki's home race coming up in Japan, that they wanted to make the move a little bit more urgent than they expected. But yeah, this really took me off guard and took me for a loop.
Yeah, I think the decision took me off guard. It feels like we've heard about this for at least a few days now, where something may be happening between these two guys. But yeah, I just think it's a wild reaction for a first 2 races where, let's be honest, Liam Lawson hasn't really performed super well. He's been well behind his teammate. He's struggled immensely, but also these are 2 races where he's had one race in the wet at a very tricky circuit, and then he's also had a sprint weekend. There's not much time to practice there either, so it's not like exactly he's been given a long leash here. The results have been bad, but I don't know if it's been this bad to replace him so quickly.
Yeah, it's quite the shock. I mean, it is about as bad as it can get, frankly. I mean, between his qualifying and what he's done for the most part in the races has not been great. But this is still really fast to be making this decision, and I'm worried that it's going to kind of shock Lawson's confidence going forward. That he's not going to be able to refine some of the form that we saw in spurts coming into that car, replacing Danny Rick. It looked like he wasn't an outstanding can't miss prospect, but he certainly looked F1 worthy, and I'm worried that that might not be in his future. Obviously, he'll still be in the Racing Bull for the rest of this year, but I wonder what his future looks like down the line, and if he doesn't get another shot at Red Bull or a top team.
Yeah, I think you have to ask the question, is this fair even for Liam? I know there was a lot of people who thought, well, he probably didn't deserve the seat in the first place. It was probably Yuki's all along here. But at the same time, only 2 races in, like I said, 2 races, 2 race weekends where it wasn't exactly normal race weekend conditions, and he's already out of the seat. Makes you think that something bigger is happening behind the scenes at Red Bull, to where the higher ups just, either they just really weren't liking what they were seeing so far, or there were bigger issues maybe with Liam and his camp, or just the his problems with the car were even worse than we thought. But yeah, for just 2 races, it's really early to move on like this, and it makes you wonder if it's fair to Liam to make that decision already by Red Bull.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is it's a panic move. I mean, this team clearly has championship ambitions, given what they've done the last few years. Max winning 4 in a row, winning a few constructors before that. They're very clearly a team that's primed to win some titles, and they feel that way at least. But with the way the car is right now, they're going to have to get a lot more out of their second driver. So I think it was kind of a quick reaction, overreaction. I'm not saying that Liam is perfect for the seat, but this is way too soon to get rid of him, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, I just don't know, even with this move, like, is it a constructors winning move to move on from Liam? I know Yuki has way more experience, and he has that side to him, but I don't know if that car, even, we've seen Max finish second and fourth so far. I mean, solid finishes, but I don't know if they have enough to even beat the McLarens this year regardless. So was it worth it to move on from Liam so soon, when that's kind of not really a factor, and maybe we can get him more comfortable for 2026. And at least with the team, I know it's going to be a different car, but at least build his confidence up maybe throughout the season. Or maybe this is the way that his confidence gets built is, through going back to racing bulls and putting in some solid finishes and performances there. Um, but it's hard to think that Liam would retake this seat from Yuki, um, regardless of how good he is the rest of the year or how bad Yuki is, just because it's a really bad optical look for Red Bull to swap back the drivers again, if it comes down to that.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'm not sure if there is a move that's a championship winning move this year in the constructors for Red Bull, short of it massively improving the car or finding a way to clone Max for that second driver spot. I mean, there's just nobody else on the grid that I think that's going to get them to that level. I think you almost sort of have to punt on this year and get ready for 2026. Maybe they feel confident in that car, or maybe they don't. But I don't think this year, barring some massive upgrades in the next few weeks, I think it could be a lost cause here in very short order, especially from a constructor's perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of, this begs the question of what happened with Liam here is, was it Liam or is it just the car? Is it kind of a broader Red Bull issue? Because this is a pattern we've seen now where, um, Pierre Gasly, he replaces Daniel Ricciardo, is out halfway through a season. That they don't like his performances there. We thought, that was a harsh decision at the time. Then Alex Albon comes in. He doesn't get much time either in that seat. And then Sergio Perez comes in, does well for a couple years, but then, really starts to struggle so much the last 2 years that we were calling for his seat. And I think a lot of people were too. And obviously, Red Bull ultimately made that decision. And now Liam just gets 2 races. Meanwhile, Max has been there the whole time. He's been the best driver in that time period, won the most races. It's just kind of a weird juxtaposition that one seat is so rotating back and forth between drivers. No one can seem to figure the car out, and then you have Max on the other hand, who's dominating, and it makes you wonder if it's Max, who maybe the car is made for him, maybe he is the only one who can figure it out, um, or if it's these other
Yeah, I
drivers.
think this is a few different things. One, I think Max is obviously a superb driver. I think he's probably in a league of his own. Obviously, guys like Hamilton and Alonso have also achieved a lot in their career, but I think with Verstappen in his prime right now, I think he's in a league of his own as far as drivers out there on the grid. And so, I mean, anybody coming into this team and trying to challenge him was always going to be behind the eight ball. But I do think, I mean, we only got 2 races with it, so it's hard to judge too much. But Lawson was kind of especially bad in these 2 races. So to qualify in dead last, it'd be one thing to be, 11th, 12th, hanging around with the midfield and be off the pace a little bit. But I mean, it was truly a disaster here. I mean, he still should have got more time, should have gotten at least a few more weeks here to prove himself. But I think this was a little bit of everything. The car being hard to drive, Lawson being maybe a step behind some of the other drivers that have been in that seat, and then Max just being on top of his game makes the gap look even bigger.
Yeah, the two things that make me think that this is, more of a Red Bull issue than a Liam issue, or at least from the car, is that one, you have Alex Albon, who I saw this, I don't know how long ago it was, but talking about his time at Red Bull and how the car, although it's not necessarily made for Max, it is suited to Max's driving style incredibly well, and it's very difficult to drive for anyone else. I think that helps out Liam's case. And then also, if you look at Max Verstappen just a week ago, said, I think Liam would be doing better right now if he was in the Racing Bulls car than he is in this Red Bull car. I think those are two things that just show how hard that car is to drive, how difficult it is, how unique of a driver you have to be to make it work. And maybe, that just doesn't suit Liam's driving style. I mean, if we look back at performances that he's put in the past couple years, even to his junior days. Um, I can't see a world where he lost all of that talent and is this bad this quickly. So I think it's got to be a mix of. I think not to say Liam hasn't made mistakes these past few weeks. He certainly has, but I don't think you could take a guy who seems to have that much talent and have him be this far off without some bigger issue.
Yeah, there certainly is a bigger issue, and I mean, I think it's just Williams not up to the task at the moment, and like you said, part of that is the car, part of that is this car being especially hard to drive, and it's not the car that we saw 2 or 3 years ago that just decimated everyone else on the grid. I think it would have been interesting if it was that car to see where Liam would have been if he would have been up closer to the top of the pack, or he still would have been struggling like this. But you're right. I think that car is just built, whether intentional or not. It's a much better fit for Max, and I think they might be, if they're able to keep Max long term, there might be a might benefit them to start seeking out drivers that have more of his driving style, even if they don't reach his talent level as a driver, because they've just tried so many at this point, and it's clear that it's you have to find a very specific kind of driver to cater to that seat, not only with the driving style, but also the acceptance that they're going to be number two and that's their job at the team.
Yeah, and it's something you wonder if Yuki has that driving style. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what his driving style is and what he likes to feel in the car, but if it's close to what Max likes, then I think that could work out great for him. If not, I think we're going to see him in a similar position to what we see Liam in right now. And speaking of Yuki, I wonder, is he ready to take on this role, moving to the main Red Bull team? I know it seems like Red Bull didn't think he was for some reason, because they didn't move him up in this offseason when there was that opening. They chose Liam instead. So it makes you wonder if Red Bull saw something that they made them think that Yuki wasn't ready for this, but I guess that they've seen otherwise in the past couple of months. It's just a tricky situation when you just had an opportunity to take this guy and you didn't, and now you've seen enough after two races and you switch to Yuki.
Yeah, I mean, at least for their sake, he was still in the stable there at Red Bull. I mean, we'll see. I think this is a big moment in Yuki's career, and I saw a lot of people saying it was sort of risk free that if he comes in and doesn't do well, then it's just another driver that failed at Red Bull, and we've seen those guys like Albon and Gasly and so on go on to do things at other teams, or obviously Ricardo as well had his moments. But I think for me personally, I think it's still very. I don't know if high risk is the right word, but it's crucial that he does well here. I think coming out of this contract, he's going to be in a weird spot with Aston Martin having Honda now, and we're not really sure what that team's going to look like if Stroll keeps a driver's spot. Then you've only got one left, and I don't see them firing Alonso for Tsunoda unless Tsunoda is incredible this year, or Alonso decides to retire. So, there might not be a spot for him on the grid next year and beyond if he doesn't perform here. I think it's a high pressure moment. I think he can live up to it, but it's not as risk free, or it's not as much of a free roll as some people think. I think he's in a really tough spot here in his F1 career, but he also has a great opportunity if he can deliver.
Yeah, I think he's in a tough spot too because he's coming into a car that seems very difficult to drive. I mean, we just saw it with how Liam's done. I guess you have that fallback if things don't work out to where you could say, look, I mean, obviously the car is incredibly difficult, and the guy before me had issues. The guy before him had issues. Even the guys before him. I mean, it just keeps going. So you have that to fall back on for Yuki, for future career prospects. But it's I do think it is imperative that he does well because obviously Red Bull haven't seen what they've wanted to see for so long to get him in that seat. And now they kind of feel like they've been forced into Yuki's the next best option. So we'll try him out and see how that goes. And if it doesn't go well, then other teams are going to look at it and say, well, they took so long to figure out if they wanted to use him or not. They obviously there was something going on to where they didn't want to use him. They finally did, and he didn't perform. I think that that's something hard for Yuki to overcome in his career when looking for other teams in the future if this Red Bull thing doesn't work out. On the other hand, if it does, he's in a great position because he is at one of the fastest teams, at one of the best teams, and a team that's always um, going to be near the top, even if they're not the number one team. Throughout their whole history, they've been one of the best teams, consistently scoring high points and podiums and wins. So there's two ways that this could go here for Yuki. One is very bad, and one is a great future, and we'll just have to wait and see how that turns out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping he is fast, not just because I like Yuki or I want him to succeed, but I think it would make for a really interesting dynamic at the team. I'm not saying he's going to be Verstappen fast, but if he's much more competitive in that car than Lawson was, it'll be interesting to see how he adapts to a second driver role at a big team. Because we've talked before about his on-track temperament, and that was obviously something that Red Bull saw an issue with in him. So I think it would be fascinating to see how that plays out over the rest of this season or a full year next year to see how he manages that, if he's comfortable with that situation or if he tries to press the issue a little bit and try and, and just see what happens there. With obviously, there's been, things in the past between Max and his dad and Marco. There's quite a stable of guys there at Red Bull that are always going to stand up for Max and are always going to sort of push his agenda. So I wonder if Yuki tries to push up against that, what will happen. So I'm excited for him, and I'm hoping that he's competitive, at least if not from day one, at least soon enough to where they don't boot him out of the car as well.
Yeah, I hope he is too, and if he is, that's a great thing. But if he doesn't perform, kind of like I mentioned earlier, it's a tough spot for Red Bull because I don't think that they can swap back drivers. Like you can't go Lawson to Yuki and then this doesn't work out. Yuki back to Lawson. I just don't think that that's the best look for an organization. I mean, maybe they do, but I don't see them going that route. So I would have to think Yuki does get this whole season to show what he's got. But do you think that there's any world where he doesn't get an entire year and maybe he's out after a few races and they're on to who knows? If they'd go Hajar, if they'd go try and sign Colapinto or whoever. I mean, I don't know what the next steps would be there if Yuki doesn't if it doesn't work
Yeah, I
out
mean, it
for him.
seems like they've been active already in the paddock. I've seen rumors of them talking to guys like Colapinto and trying to figure that out. I mean, we don't know what his season's going to look like at Alpine. Doohan hasn't done as poorly as Lawson has these first two races, but he hasn't lit it on fire there. And Colapinto may have a seat locked down there for next season. So I wonder what that situation is going to look like. But yeah, I'd be fascinated to see this offseason. I think is going to be wild with new regulations coming in, with a few open seats available. I've already seen people theorizing about Max moving on from Red Bull, and if he ends up at Mercedes, maybe a guy like George Russell's on the market. There's going to be, I think, some driver movement, even if it's not that in the off season, and I think that's going to be a fascinating storyline to watch throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, getting silly season started in March is, I think, the earliest that you can get. This is wild that I can't remember a driver, in at least the modern era, being out so quickly after two races. I mean, it's kind of unprecedented territory that we're entering, and luckily for Lawson, I guess they have a sister team that he can go down to and stay in F1. If this was any other team, he'd probably be out of a seat, and it might be out of a career in F1. Maybe he can make something of it here, but we're truly entering unprecedented area that I'm just really interested to see how this goes, and Like you said, it's going to open up a lot for the driver market. The rest of this season into the off season ahead of 2026. Last thing here, I think that we need to touch on, was this the right decision from a Red Bull perspective? Do you think? Obviously, we've touched on it for Liam, we've touched on it for Yuki, but for Red Bull, do you think this is the right decision going forward? Maybe not even for this season, but for the years to come, having Yuki as the second guy compared to
I would
Lawson.
say whether or not it was the right decision as far as picking the better driver, I think the timing makes it the wrong decision. I think you're talking about a long term thing potentially here, even if Sonoda doesn't work out and they're looking for another guy. There's always going to be people desperate for a seat, so it's not like it's going to be unfillable. But they might miss out on some of the top guys. They might not want to go to a team that is willing to fire a driver after two races when they have other options out there. And I think that's something that could really hurt their recruitment in the future if they can't build up academy guys that can come out and race for a top team, which they haven't here for a while. They've had to stick with Perez for longer than they were hoping for, and then now this Lawson thing doesn't work out. So if Yuki does work out, they'll be fine for this year, maybe a couple years longer. But if he doesn't work out, I think they're in real trouble here with the driver market going forward. And I think even if they are managed to salvage something out of this season, they're not winning a title this year. And I think it does more damage to them long term in terms of driver recruitment than it is an advantage of maybe gaining a spot or two in the constructors this year when I don't think they're going to win the title.
Yeah, I agree. I think that long term, it could be the right move, but I think that the timing is just completely off. I think if you were gonna go the Yuki route, you should have done it in the off season. I mean, I don't know. I know it's a performance based sport, and you have to perform to continue in your spot. But at the same time, it's only been 2 races. I don't know what that, does when you look at, a big picture of everything. I feel like if they probably had all this data on Liam, already from his junior days up until, F2 and then through, the Racing Bulls program for the last couple of years, and I just think that they had enough to make this decision last offseason where you can give Lawson more time in the RB car to build up his confidence, build up what seemed like a great momentum for his career, and give it to a guy in Yuki who has put in the time with Red Bull and definitely deserved that spot. Um, I just think that if they were going to make that decision, it should have been made in the offseason. And I agree that it's more of a timing thing than anything else for me. But yeah, it could be the right decision in terms of performance, but I don't think it's going to affect them in terms of if they, can win a constructors this year. Cause I think that that's kind of already out the
Yeah, and
window.
there's nothing wrong with making a midseason move, especially if it's a summer break move. We've seen it plenty of times before, and drivers know that that's part of the business. But two races is just too extreme for a team that, like I said, was not competing for a title, in my
Hmm.
opinion, anyways, this year. Maybe there's a scenario where they get an upgrade and Max can compete for the driver's title, but I don't think they had anybody that they could
Yeah.
possibly get with the talent in that second seat to compete for a constructors title this year, unless some upgrades hit and this thing flips 180. So I think that at the end of the day, they should have punted on this year, even if it means sticking with Liam longer than you should have. At least give him to summer break, or even like 10 races. Give him a little bit of time to figure it out. If you had this little faith in him in the first place to pull him after two races, even as bad as it's been, then like you said, he shouldn't have been in the car in the first place, and this should have been Yuki's seat all along. But you have to accept the decision that you made and live with it for the time being.
Yeah, and I think that, that's a great point. We haven't even gotten to any places where Liam has raced before. It's been 2 weekends that have not been normal race Grand Prix weekends. So, yeah, to me, the decision in the long term, it may work out for them, but I think it was the wrong decision in terms of timing, in terms of the way they went about it, and they probably could have made this decision last off season and made it a whole lot easier for them, going forward. Kind of, we've seen this stuff before from Red Bull, and it's just more driver turmoil there that we've seen for going on 5, 6,
Yeah,
7
and that's
years
the
now.
thing is that this past offseason, when we found out that Lawson was going to get the seat, we both said that Yuki had deserved it and that he deserved that opportunity. So, at the end of the day, we both think Yuki deserves to be there. We just think that this timing was ridiculous, and you kind of have to live with your decision for a little while and give him a chance because now you've potentially shattered his confidence. I'm hoping he can get it back a little bit with that Racing Bull, and you never know if he comes back and finds good form with that car, then maybe teams are just willing to write off that car is undrivable to anyone except for Max. But I think, yeah, it's just a timing thing. The timing was poor and just adds to Red Bull's already dicey reputation as far as driver management.
Yeah, I'm 100% agree there. Well, I think that's pretty much everything from this, crazy emergency a news show. Thank you, Sam, for joining here and kind of on short notice, but I think this was some big news that we had to talk about, and I'm sure you guys are glad to hear some takes on this as well. So, Sam, thank you again for joining, and
Yeah,
thank you
thanks
guys for
everyone.
listening.
Had a great time.